Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Pieczek, and I'm on a mission to help you become your potential. Today, I'm very fortunate to be speaking with a longtime friend, artist, fellow writer and coach, Katie Curtin. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you.
Katie's a coach who specializes in helping clients with their creative projects, including their books. She's also great at helping people break their money spells and is working on a book of her own on that subject to follow up her previous money book, The Happy, Well-Fed Artist. She also hosts the Creativity Cafe, which features events and interviews with creative pioneers, social innovators, artists, and activists. And the last thing I want to say about you, Katie, is that I know you have a lifelong commitment to social justice issues, and that this is rooted in a very deep kindness and compassion for people. The first thing I noticed when I met you was your kindness. And I think that's an exceptional quality in a coach. So welcome, and thanks for taking the time to do this with me.
Thank you very much. That's a very generous introduction. And I just took to you after the first meeting. We were at a coffee place in a social innovation center. And I've been so impressed by your work, and you're an amazing organizer of events as well. And it's just a privilege to be here with you, and a pleasure, shall we say.
Thanks, Katie. Well, yeah, it's mutual. I think we're a bit of kindred spirits here, and I appreciate you noticing my creative or my organizational skills. One of the best compliments, and possibly a backhanded one, I received was that I'm a ruthless taskmaster. And so I took it as a compliment because, hey, someone needs to get the trains running on time. But yeah, so I've worked on developing other skills as well since then. But why don't we dive in? And I want to ask you a few things that I think are important to both of us and to our audiences as well. Why do so many people, especially creatives, struggle with money? And what's the solution?
Oh, big question. Well, creatives, and particularly artists, have been told things like, if you do your art, you're gonna starve, and you won't get enough money. Activists are told that money is bad, and so you shouldn't try and have too much. And there's all kinds of concepts about how having money is something that might make you evil or not yourself. So people don't always they want money, but they don't. And also, I think there's just a lot of, and we can get into this later, just a lot of self-esteem questions. A lot of things that are there that I've actually become aware of over the years, because originally I didn't think, actually I tried to avoid money because I didn't like the way money was used in this society. And I think a lot of people feel the same, where, there's a few billionaires controlling the economies. And it's, and we're on if you look at it, with the planet, we're in danger, both for other species and ourselves. And so there's a lot of ways that we organize and where money is put ahead of actually the good of this planet and the good of people. So people tend to kind of say, well, I don't want to deal with money. Money's evil. And it may be conscious or unconscious. And so when you have those attitudes, then it's hard to keep money or to even use it necessarily well. And so a lot of social innovators and creatives, even when they get money, it just might flow through their hands very quickly without them really being able to use it properly. So that's a short answer to it. There's a lot more.
It seems to be a very common theme in a lot of people's lives, not just creatives, that there's this idea that money is evil. I mean, we're taught this, there's I think there's a passage from the Bible that says it's easier for a rich person to get into for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to get into heaven. I mean, that's a pretty, damning statement for rich people. Most of us don't want to have that kind of karmic or spiritual, problems. But I think the reality is that spirituality and money have nothing really to do with each other. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I don't think being spiritual means not having money, or not having money means you're spiritual, because And I agree with you about how a lot of religions basically, in some ways, trash material values or think it's wrong to have material things. And I think that's not true either. I think we kind of idolize material things in the society. We've gone way too far, and people think that money will. Like money's connected with self-esteem, it's connected with being a success and all that. And on the other hand, as you said, it's connected with being not being right. I know I was brought up by, well, my mother was Roman Catholic. My father came from a Jewish background, but she was kind of like the poor shall inherit the earth. And she had a very ambiguous attitude towards money. She both wanted me as her child to have money, but on the other hand, she kind of was, when my brother would make like one of my brothers made a lot of money, and she would kind of be a bit ambiguous towards it. So yeah, I think a lot of people face that contradiction.
I certainly,
and it doesn't need to be that way. Sorry.
Yeah. I grew up with a lot of negative talk about money. There's the classics that money doesn't grow on trees. We can't afford it. Why would you spend your money, waste your money on something like that? You grow up hearing that stuff, and the things you learn when you're a child are very hard to get rid of, I think, sometimes. What are the mindsets that are needed, and how do you overcome that programming?
Well, I think there's a lot of, one is that I am enough and I have enough, and like to have this attitude of abundance, even if you're not like you don't have to have billions of dollars to have enough. I mean, or millions, or I mean, it's obviously there's a certain level of prosperity that helps one be happier. And there have been studies, I think, in North America, it's something like 70,000, 60,000. After that level, and it may change with the housing crisis going up, people are not a lot happier if they get more. So I think the thing is it's letting go of a lot of concepts. Like it's letting go that money is equated with success. It's feeling enough, and it's also just looking for the abundance that you have. Like usually most of us here have food on the table, and we have pretty good food on the table.
We have food, we have shelter, we have, entertainment basically covered. A lot of us have a lifestyle that was unimaginable to kings 100 years ago.
Exactly. And the amount of consumer goods we have is just unparalleled, and actually is a source of it is the source of problems too, because you have as you get older, you accumulate a lot of things and clutter, and people in their like later part of their lives are, they've spent all their life getting all these things, and then they spend the rest of their lives trying to get rid of it and downsize. It's kind of ridiculous. Yes. And the thing is that we have a society that's based on people consuming things, and the economy is based on encouraging excess consumption, and often consumption of things that you don't need. So it's not entirely our fault. In fact, it's not our fault that we're in a culture and a system which is not very well, I don't think is very well organized for human beings or the rest of the beings on this planet.
It's almost like we're suffering from this mass psychosis. It's like a group Inception movie where we're all reading the same nightmare. We got to get more. It has to be more. And I can tell you, I personally struggle with this still. The idea that my earnings are tied to my self-worth. And I'm working very hard to overcome this, but I'll tell you, as an entrepreneur, sometimes the money flows and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, it's very hard to tell yourself that, hey, I'm still a valuable, productive member of society. There's all kinds of things that are linked that shouldn't be. The self-esteem and the money, or the productivity piece. And so what do you teach your clients, whether it's in sessions with them or you've written a book and you're working on another money book, what do you teach on this subject?
Well, first of all, one of the things that I teach primarily is that we have to get rid of all the blocks that we have about money are usually blocks that we have about everything.
Oh,
like self-esteem is a problem in everything. If you don't have self-esteem, then that is translated in relationships, it's on the job, it's everywhere. So usually what you find, I mean, it's an avenue where you can actually explore all your issues. And so when I'm working with somebody on money, it will very quickly get into what their family thought about money, trauma in the family, if they've been abused, which many people have, whether it's sexual abuse or it's violence, like bodily violence, or just telling them they're no good. That will all come up in their, what I might call their money story, or how they interact with money. And so I will, how I work is to, and when I'm doing it specifically around money, I have a whole series of sessions that I do with people, and a questionnaire where I delve into their family history, what their culture says, because depending on, Canada has many different people from different backgrounds, and so does the US. And each of them will have very different, may have very different money beliefs. And even within the same racial group, it may be very different from one to another. Somebody might have a really high esteem of themselves, even if they're in an oppressed racial group, or, they're a person of color or indigenous. Somebody who's white can have really bad money problems because they were beaten and we're told they were wrong all the time. And, this is what I've sort of discovered in working with people. I've been kind of surprised sometimes, by that. So I always sort of treat people as individuals, but also look out for those kind of cultural and cultural things, plus, like like trauma through, like slavery was obviously a huge trauma, and racism, it continues today, and it's continued through generations. So in my case,
finding that everyone has these challenges that are global, like part of our social, societal challenges, but also the very personal, what you were taught when you were a child, right?
Right. Yeah, and how your parents were, because your parents can be just amazing, and you might be and really love you and give you an amazing upbringing, and you might be in the poorest circumstances.
Yes.
And I just actually was reading this was written, I think, quite a long time ago, autobiography, but with some other contributors, of Pavarotti, and he starts the whole book, and it's quite charming, about how happy he was, even though he was really poor, and how he was surrounded by all these loving people, and his neighbor, it was just a real community experience. And so it wasn't that he didn't have problems as an artist later, because he had very many lean years, but he definitely didn't have this huge equation of money with happiness and all that. It was with community. And maybe just to say there, I think our happiness does come, and this is something that's not taught in our society, because we're taught that, we have to fight for ourselves, we're the individual, we have to prove how great we are. And instead of having a sense of what's important is community and contributing to community and being part of community.
I've actually noticed recently that the happiest times in my life have been the ones where I was deeply engaged in a community, whether that's at work or with friends or traveling with people. And that seems, I just noticed that recently, that seems to be the common thread about, when I feel like I'm living my life to the fullest, it's when I'm with other people.
Yeah, and me too. And I'm an extreme extrovert, so it's
Yeah.
even more so. And there's some people who, I think introverts who like less social contact, but everybody does need other people, and we all profit from other people, like their presence, and the differences. Like we're all trying to live up to some ideal, but what
Yeah.
is absolutely fantastic are the differences. Like you're really strong in organization and well, and many other things, like critical thinking, writing, and all that. But you have a strong, you're really strong
Right.
in organization. I'm not.
Right.
I love
Well,
people like that.
you fooled me.
Glad to hear it. It's a lifelong push to keep
No,
organized.
you're right. I think everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, but I think there are a few things that we all share in common. And hey, I identify as an introvert. I prefer to have a lot of solo
Really?
time. I don't do well in long-term situations where I'm in a group. However, especially COVID has taught me this. I need some kind of social outlet, and I think Simon Sinek has a wonderful book. I forget which one it is. Leaders Eat Last, I believe, and he talks about these four primary neurotransmitters. Transmitters. There's endorphins. When you work out, you feel that rush of the runner's high. There's dopamine. When you solve a problem, you get a hit. That's why our phones are so addictive. And then there's serotonin, which is the social chemical, right? And you only get that released when you have social contact with people. I think that's so important that we're experiencing that.
Yeah, and we really are. I mean, that's in our biology, the need for
Yeah.
others, and that's how human. I mean, it's the history of human society is being communal animals. And many. I mean, I don't know if that's the best way of saying it, but we are communal in our whole biology and how we've developed. All our great achievements are on the basis of community.
Yes.
And I think what is part of the tragedy of what's happening right now with COVID and the pandemic and all that, and the being enclosed, is that people have been much more isolated than ever, and physically, and in terms of single people, or older people who are in homes and they can't see their family. It's very, very difficult times that way, but it does teach you how important it is.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what it's like for a single person that just have gone through 18 months of lockdown. At least here in Ontario, we've been pretty locked down.
Right.
But it's funny. I noticed at the beginning of the pandemic that there was everybody had this urge to reach out and contact their neighbor. Hey, how you doing? Are you okay? Talk to friends, set up these little Zoom meetings. By 6 months in, I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody. And my theory on that is that the longer we're away from people, the longer we're isolated, the less we want to talk to people. And I don't know if there's any science to that. It seems to be true in my case anyway.
That's interesting. Yeah, one kind of loses one's initiative around it, and maybe it could be. Yeah, that's interesting that happened to you.
Yes.
I'm not sure how much it happened to other people, or whether it was a general trend, but yeah. And I think definitely I got tired. Well, I have to do Zoom for my business, but and for my clients, and I enjoy doing those calls. Like with you, we're doing Zoom right now, but I have to say that many times I'm just zoomed out. I just don't want another meeting through Zoom, and it's not the same as being in person.
And I'm betting we're going to have studies come out very soon from researchers that will look at this problem and say, yeah, this is a real thing, and maybe it's even a clinical condition of Zoom fatigue or Zoom burnout. Because definitely there are some days that I don't feel like getting on to talk to anybody with Zoom or on the phone. But yeah, it's an interesting experiment in progress, I suppose.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to money for a second. I know you've written the previous book about money, but I'm really curious about your new book in progress on money. And can you tell us the title? And I had a sneak peek, but maybe give us as much as you can about what you're working on and show us behind the curtain.
Okay. Well, it's called Breaking Money Spells, and it's the rough subtitle. I don't know if it'll stay the same, but how money changes everything, but it doesn't have to change you. And what I've done is I've tried, it's been a long time in the making, and it combines both my own experiences around money, which have been very challenging at times, and my clients, and how we've traversed those things. Plus it integrates fairy tales, which is a bit different. Plus it tries to it integrates also some of the overall political and economic situation, because I think all of those are linked.
Yes.
So it's been quite a challenge to integrate all those elements. But why I include a bit of the political and economics of what we're facing is because we don't live in a vacuum. Somebody who's in a completely different society years ago and tribal doesn't have the same problems with money and or concepts of money, and we are ruled by certain things, like if our economy shuts down, or like, for example, with the pandemic, it made a big, it didn't matter that much your attitude around money. You may have been very successful before, but it sure as hell could change it. Now, for some people, it was a disaster.
Yes.
And for other people, it actually meant increased opportunity. So it wasn't even. So, but that kind of society-wide thing has an impact. And so you have to recognize it, and not just say that people are all equal and face all the same situations. Somebody who has a huge disability, physical disability, they can't get the same jobs as other people, or like if so it's not an equal playing field. However, at the same time, I think you need to say that we all have a responsibility to deal, not just to blame it on society, because we can do that, but also to say, well, how can I do the best with what I have?
Yes.
And where can I let go of those beliefs that are holding me back? And, I might not be as successful with money. I might not need to be as successful as money as some people, but I can live with money with the least amount of worry, and with the least amount of attaching it to my self-worth.
Yes.
So I think there's both the social and individual responsibility. And there's also why I brought fairy tales into it was I love fairy tales from the time I was very small. I read the whole children's library selections of fairy tales. And but why I'm using it is it's often useful to bring in archetypes to be able to kind of see our patterns now. And
An example.
Yeah. Well, I've been using this popular story of Cinderella. It's a fairy tale. And I've developed it in my own way, the characters in that fairy tale. And I do that. I do it with my clients as well in some of my classes, where they will take the characters and give their own interpretations. But how I've done it and how I do it in my book is that I see Cinderella as kind of like her situation at the beginning is she was in a good situation, but she's lost her mother and she's lost her social standing, and she serves, she's like a slave. She's exploited by her stepsisters, and she feels very trapped. And so I make some, and she's overworking. And I think there's a lot of people who are like that and feel like there's no escape. And so I use her to discuss certain aspects of money. And then I have the father, her father, and I have him as somebody who at the palace is in charge of happy, like a CEO in the but the chief happiness officer. He's organizing all the events and festivals and balls, and he organizes the ball for the prince. And
he's super busy climbing that social ladder, I'm sure, and working
exactly
on and neglecting the daughter. And
exactly. And also feeling like so used to this, providing his family, first his wife and Cinderella, but later the stepmother and the stepdaughters. He's so used to providing them with a really good standard of living that he feels trapped.
Nice.
And he loved his job at the beginning, but he no longer loves it, and he feels like he can't get out of it. Exactly.
Isn't that such a statement on a lot of people, especially that I know, that are maybe, I had a friend who explained to me his job and the compensation packages that were offered at his workplace. And he told me, yeah, this is how they keep you in for life. You don't get out because it just becomes too painful to leave that job. And I don't know if he's happy or not these days in that work, but to me, it doesn't seem like very interesting work. But maybe to him, it's wonderful and he's enjoying the climbing the ladder. But yeah, it's easy to get stuck in a job or in a career even. Without putting your head up to think about, hey, what am I actually doing with my life? Is this the legacy that I want to leave? Is this how I want to spend my days and my moments?
Exactly. And it's not always easy because you can't always just quit a job. If you have a family and you have other people relying on you, you can't just do that. But there's usually a way. And I think, when you let go of some of your beliefs that I can't stop this, I can't do anything else, then opportunities do come up. And I know for it wasn't like a high CEO job, but I never was interested in that, but or particularly suited to it. But I was working in the railways, and I had a good steady job, and I thought, oh, this is exciting. At first, I'm doing a man's job. I was working as a apprentice diesel mechanic machinist. But the thing is, it was kind of like a exciting idea. I actually, with some other women, created a new situation for women in the trades. So we were doing some good things, but the problem is that I wasn't suited for that work. I thought, I just want to do something like men do. I can prove myself. So I proved myself, but I wasn't happy. And I kept dreaming of being an artist. But I would keep saying, that's not practical, because my parents would kind of say, artists starve, etc. Or,
so you got those greatest hits from your parents as well.
Yeah, even though they were both artists.
Isn't that interesting? Wow. I didn't know that. And I know you were an artist for a long time, and you probably still are, but I never really got to ask you, I never had a chance to ask you about that time in your life. So tell me, how did you become an artist? You said you had this compulsion to go into art, but what did you do, and how did it inform sort of the rest of your life?
Well, what I did is I kind of thought about it, took a few courses at first. I was working at the railways, as I said. And then I just decided I wasn't going to be, I just couldn't, I kind of thought, well, I'll do it when I'm 70 or 80 when I retire. And then I thought, I can't live life like that.
Right.
And so and I didn't know, I really at that time didn't even think I was creative, or I knew I was a little bit artistic, but I didn't know if it was enough to succeed as an artist at all. And my parents had you had to be like Picasso or something, like you had to be extraordinarily good. So when I actually announced it to my mother, she, she kind of said, "Oh, I'm surprised, Katie."
Oh dear.
So
Yeah,
it was
that's a
like,
signal right there that, oh, maybe your parents don't believe in you.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I then, I actually just quit my job. I had a bit of a pension at that time, even though I was only, my early 30s, I think, when I actually quit. And I went on a year's excursion around the world because that was also in my dreams. And well, not around the world, I went to Asia. And while I was in Asia, I studied with a mask maker in Bali, Indonesia. And that was really, really good and fun. And then I came back and I went to um, university and studied art. And then I kind of was feeling like visual arts weren't quite,
Mm.
it wasn't quite me, like just the visual arts. And then I later kind of took some courses in theater and
Yes.
went into theater. And I did mask making and puppetry for many years. And also other theater, like I wrote a play or two, and I had a theater company with my husband, and I did like about 14 years where I did residencies in the schools, teaching, which was just part-time, but it was going and teaching kids about art
Yeah.
or about culture through the arts. So yeah, and I've cycled through a lot of different arts. Like, I'm not somebody who's just a painter, just a sculptor, just a mask maker or whatever. As people may
You
have gathered,
worked in
I have a
different
lot of
areas.
interests.
Yeah.
Yeah, like my mother was just a painter. That
Mm.
was her focus. She once she had was had risen once she had raised us kids, and also she went back and got a job as a teacher for a while. But once she had economic security to do her art, she would work in her studio like 7 days a week, 5 or 6 hours, and she did that to her. She did hours until her mid 80s, and then her hand was trembling, so she had to stop. So I had that model of being an artist, and my
Yeah.
father was a photographer and always doing that. But I kind of just couldn't do that. I just like variety, and that's kind of been the story of my life,
Yeah,
variety.
it's such a unique and interesting upbringing. I mean, to watch, two parents and to be such creative people. I mean, my parents were really not. They were both.
Mm.
My mom was a teacher, which involves quite a lot of creativity. But my dad, was an engineer, and there wasn't a lot of creativity there in some sense. Not at least not with the art, visual art, or other art. But you got, I guess, sort of a very unique upbringing. And I heard recently someone say that everything you do in life informs the next thing you do. I'm wondering how
Mm.
that upbringing and this work as an artist sort of led you into the next phase of your life, which was, I guess, was coaching and writing books.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I found, like, I've always had this social community based thing, or interest in personal and political transformation. So for a while, I thought, well, as an artist, it would be good to have another income source. So there
Mhm.
was a practical thing around it. Although at first I made more money as an artist than I did as a coach, which was a shock.
Right.
But because you become fairly successful in one area, and you do okay, and then you have to go to a new area and start from the beginning. So I did actually study a whole load of therapy. Like, I did a year in Gestalt therapy. I did art therapy for a year, and a number of other things, but it never quite gelled. It just seemed
Yeah.
like I didn't have the tools to work with people that worked for me. And then I heard about coaching, and this was like years ago. This was about 17 years ago, and coaching was just in its infancy then, or its early days.
Absolutely.
Not unlike now, where everybody's a coach everybody knows coaches.
Yeah.
So, but I did one weekend with the Coaches Training Institute, and it was like I found my way. It was like I have like it just seemed natural to me.
Yeah.
Which yeah, it didn't mean I didn't have to train in it, because I did, but it just felt like I had a lever or a way to work with people that worked for me.
What was it about this one? It's a school, I assume, Coach Training Institute, or a training program. What was it about that specific program that worked for you? What clicked?
Gee, that's a good question. Well, they were very interactive in their training, and they just got you doing things right away, which is very good for me, because if I just stay in theory, that doesn't really help me. So it was like the first day that we did, or maybe it was second day of the weekend that we did, we had to actually coach a person. Excellent. And I was scared to death, but it worked amazingly well, given that I'd never done it before.
In the deep end.
Yeah, and so that started it, and it just this particular, I mean, it's a really good coaching school. I haven't done coaching with one of the other many schools, but it just was very good. And one thing that it did, which I really found very helpful, was it also had a part where you really it had a lot of techniques, but it also, there was a part about using your intuition and voicing your intuition. And while at the time I didn't think my intuition was anything special, that was actually, that's my strong suit now. And but the thing that they taught, and I think it's very useful, or at least for me, it's been one of the main things that I love, is that to actually say or blurt what your intuition, your feeling of what's going on, and ask the other person, is this true? Or is this completely ridiculous? So it's not like assuming your intuition is always right on, but it always leads to an interesting conversation.
I really like that technique. And I think that's because I've noticed sort of, semi-consciously that it works. Sometimes you do have a intuitive, thought or feeling, and you want to get it out, and sometimes you let it pass, and then that's a mistake. The moment's passed. But when I do sort of blurt out, I did that today with a coaching client, and I think I shocked her a little bit, but it sparked off a really good turn in the conversation, and I think it was helpful. So it's interesting that you are noticing the same thing.
Yeah, and now, like, I use often, I did other training since the Coaches Training Institute, like I got a certificate there, but I also trained in the energy therapies and things like the emotional freedom technique, because I felt like I didn't have quite enough from the CTI to go into some of the deep issues that prevent people from doing what they really want.
Right.
And one of the techniques I use is this emotional freedom technique, and I use it a bit differently than most practitioners.
And I'm not too familiar with that one. Is that the same as tapping?
Yeah, it's tapping. And what I do is tap, but I also, and this is different, I just say whatever comes to my mind as I'm tapping. I'm tapping for the other person, my client. And then we do a round, and then I say, well, was this complete nonsense, or does it does it resonate in every way? And as I did this over the years, it seems most of the time people would say, you nailed it. You said exactly what I'm thinking or what I felt. And which is okay. So I say what somebody's felt, but it also helped doing that, and the tapping and that, it helped them clear it. It wasn't just that it expressed what was going on, but it helped going to the deeper levels. And so more and more I've had confidence with that, but I always do check. Yes. And there's sometimes when I'm thinking, oh my God, this sounds so stupid. I really don't want to say it. I really don't want to say it. And then it's kind of like, okay, I'm saying it, because the way I've learned is effective.
You've learned to trust your gut, and I'm
Mhm.
guessing it doesn't let you down most of the time.
Yeah, and even if it does, even if they say, "Oh no, that's not exactly how I feel," then you feel or it didn't resonate with me. Well, then you find out why it didn't, and so you're
Yeah.
actually further along anyway.
It's an iterative process. You sort of
Hmm.
are bouncing closer toward the root of the subject.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I heard somewhere that these Apollo rockets that went to the moon, they were off course like 99% of the time. Off course only like by a millimeter or something like that, or a degree. But so you have to keep constantly adjusting. I think that's a good metaphor for coaching sometimes, is that you don't know exactly what to say or which direction to take it, but you sort of you bounce something off the client and you let them respond, and then you get it's almost like sonar. You're bouncing these sound waves off the wall, and you can
I love
see a
that.
picture of where you're at and where you need to go. And I think a lot of coaches sort of maybe struggle with that, is trusting their intuition and sort of just feeling it out a little bit.
And it is, I mean, this is the thing that the Coaches Training Institute taught me a lot, and I think is the principle of coaching. And I tend to do a bit of a combination of coaching and consulting. But in pure coaching, it's like you're not advising anybody. You're drawing out from them what they need,
Yeah,
and it's they who have the solutions in them,
right.
and not you. And so it's very, very interesting if you can just let go of your thoughts about what maybe they should do and draw out from them what they really need to, what is needed. And
You are the third or fourth person to tell me this in the last 2 months, is that we coaches, we're not here to give advice. We're not here to tell you what the solution is. We're here to help you realize that you already have the solution inside of you. We're just here to be a type of mirror almost that reflects and shows you what you can't maybe see by yourself.
exactly. And when I mean, in certain cases, like if you're working with a business, you'll say, well, my experience is this works, or that, or, I use
Yeah.
my experience with creative businesses and that to sort of say, well, this possibility might suit you more or something, but it's not to impose it on them. It's more just to say, among all the things that I know, maybe this might
Yes.
work for you, but then still seeing what their reaction is. And I think I don't know if you've ever had this, but when people give advice, it's almost like they know they're putting themselves in a superior position. And it's really easy to do this, but it's human, but it's not helpful, because people want to be empowered. And when you're drawing it out from them, it enables them to be more empowered. And it also is more authentically what they want or what will work with them.
Yeah, I've noticed that in my own coaching, and frankly made those mistakes in the beginning when I was starting out and trying to solve everyone's problems. No, that's not really what a coach does. It's that you're not here to give advice. That's your friends can do that for you, but for the coach, it's more of, it's helping you understand, come to the conclusion on your own. Because if someone gives you the solution, you might intellectually understand that it's the right thing to do. But you'll never implement that solution if you just understand it intellectually. You really do need to feel it in your bones almost to say, okay, I'm never gonna smoke again because I understand, not just intellectually, but on an emotional level, why it's not serving me, right?
Yeah, really true.
Mm.
And just one additional thing to say about this is that we, as I guess the people who gravitate to being therapists or coaches or whatever, are people who really want to help each other, help others. But there's sometimes, a bit of a dysfunctional part of us that wants to save other people, who, the savior complex, and maybe it's because in our families we wanted to do that for our parents, or, like there's just certain parts of us that want to solve things for others. And so we have to be really careful about that.
Yes, I'm a fixer.
Definitely. A fixer, yes.
How does a coach avoid doing that?
It's self-discipline in some ways, and it's noticing. It's like, I don't think well, maybe some people avoid doing it all the time, but it's a hard habit to break altogether. Yes. And I know when I was doing my coaches training, they would keep catching you at it. And so that was very helpful, because you saw, unless other people see it for you at first, you don't even see it yourself.
Yeah, so it's practice coupled with maybe a mentor to monitor you or something like that.
Yeah, and then also, if you're self-observant and sort of see, well, look at a coaching, a coaching interaction, usually when it goes well is when you're not doing the advice thing. You may be providing some ideas, but when I always know if I've gone too much into advice rather than really coaxing it out.
Sort of a related, but not quite related question. How important is it for a coach to be self-aware?
Well, it's probably number one. Because I mean, you're teaching other people to lead a life, a life where they're going to see their potential, develop their potential. You must be self-aware yourself.
You would hope, yeah.
Not everybody, and that's not like the thing is with any. And this actually addresses one of the problems that people have with money or being an artist. Everybody thinks they're a fraud in some ways, that they're not good enough, that they're afraid that they're not, they're somehow going to be exposed. And, if you're writing a book, you're afraid that people are going to discover you're not as smart about this topic or whatever. So everybody has that fear. And, it's something that you do have to work with. So coming back to what we were just saying is that no coach is going to be perfect. And sometimes I know for me, it's like, oh, how the hell can I be a coach? I'm so fucked up, and excuse me, I have to censor this in so many ways. And we all are in many ways. This society does not produce profoundly healthy people. We've got centuries of trauma, of war, of all those things happening. So we're doing the best we can. And the thing is just being aware. And I think for me, part of it is being compassionate. I think you're a better coach when maybe you've had these experiences of your imperfection, because all your clients come to you feeling imperfect. And if they can be just listened to in a way where they, not that they feel that you're so fucked up, you're so screwed up that you can't help them, but that what it is to be human.
Been there. Yeah. I heard a wonderful quote. It was from a guy named Rory Vaden in Success Magazine. And he said that you are most powerfully positioned to help the person that you once were.
Yeah.
And so for me, I try to be very honest with my clients. Hey, I'm not perfect. I don't have a perfect life. I still make tons of mistakes. I'm working with my own coach ongoing, and I'm working on it. But I find it's very it's a red flag for me when I see a coach who seems to have everything figured out and presents that persona. Yeah, so that there's something there. But
in one of my bios that I've had on my website, I'm not sure if it's in my present one, I always say I'm not a Barbie doll coach.
I saw that today, yeah.
Because sometimes
important to point that out, yeah. Well, and you mentioned, that our society doesn't really breed healthy people for the most part. And you're right. When you get to a certain age, you realize that wow, the world is more messed up than I really thought it was. You know, although it seems like we've all agreed to participate in a certain society, it's a pretty messed up society. And you know, it's led me in my younger years to become a social activist. And I know you have been a lifelong social activist,
Mhm.
you know, not just with the working on the diesel trains, but elsewhere, and writing a book about women in China, I
Mhm.
believe. You have,
Mhm.
and you're still a social activist, and I wonder, because I kind of have lost my drive for that, and I think it coincided with going to Africa, starting this social enterprise to bring solar lighting to villages, and
Yeah.
it ended poorly. I was almost kidnapped. You know, all the products were stolen. I had to flee back to Canada, but and I think that took a little bit of my compassion from me, and working on that. But how have you maintained your interest and your passion for this social justice work? Because I think that's very important for a coach to have.
Right. Well, I've been through cycles. It's in the sense that from the time I was about 17 to the time I was in my early 30s, I was like active morning, noon, and night. And then I kind of burned out because I saw that society wasn't, I thought, oh, the revolution's going to happen. It was the 60s and the 70s, and it just felt, or at least the early 70s, felt like things were really changing. And then when things didn't, all that work seemed like for naught, and it wasn't like the most people were agreeing with us. So, so I kind of got discouraged, and it's not and wasn't as active as before. I got involved in the arts and other things, and then I had a kid, which takes up a lot of energy.
As
And
I
so I haven't been as active as I would like, but I always sought to have a combination of not just coaching and art, but to integrate that with activism, and support for social justice causes.
yes.
So right now, as a coach, I'm involved in a couple of climate coaching circles where uh, coaches who are interested around climate change and advocacy and activism around that are getting together. But I don't have the perfect solution, and I find also I don't have the same type of energy that I had when I was 19 years old
Of
for
course.
meetings and things like that. So I'm looking at all these situations that we're in a very obviously serious situation for the planet. And I think each of us has to do what we can. Now, I can't do the same as when I was an 18-year-old
Mhm.
activist. I don't have that kind of energy. I don't have that kind of
Mhm.
how would you say it? I don't even have exactly the same beliefs, but I'm trying. I think each of us has to look at how we can be most effective.
Yes.
We may not be the same as a certain kind of activist. Everybody has a different role to play. Some people may give more money to the cause. Some people may be full-time, organizing
Mhm.
mass demonstrations or boycotts or whatever. Um, so as I'm looking at it more now, I'm moving into also coaching people who are in to help people who may be activists or doing things like doing books around the climate crisis. So I'm using my coaching skills there. And some of my artistic skills I do these rants, so I sometimes do political rants. I did one before the Trump victory in a local open mic, but so I don't think I really saw myself um, in a different way when I was a teenager, but now I recognize that I can only um, that I have a different role to play. But it's hard for me not to say, oh,
Katie, are you there? Hey, Katie, you're muted.
Myself.
There, we're back. I'll edit
Yeah,
that part out.
the tech gremlins. We're almost over, and it that sometimes happens.
No worries. We'll edit that out. But
Mhm,
you were saying that you work from where you are. You are
mhm.
doing what you can. You're not the 19-year-old with the energy to be on the front lines anymore. But so what
Yeah.
else did you want to add to that?
Well, just that I'm continuously looking for opportunities to help that way, and I don't feel like um, I've arrived at the well, we never arrive at the final answer, but I mean, when I was like, I'm in Mexico a lot, and so that's a bit of a different situation, but I'm back in Canada for quite a while now. I was hoping to participate in some demonstrations and things
Yeah.
around the climate, but I haven't seen that much organized, so I
People might
can't.
not be ready to get back to the streets together yet, of course.
Exactly.
But it sounds like
So
you're playing to your strengths, and I like that you're honest about what your passions are, where you can add value, and you're combining that with your coaching work, which is great.
yeah. And I mean, sometimes like I do what I can. Like one example is I think part of activism or part of changing things is just having open discussions with people. So when I'm in Mexico, taxis are really cheap there, like a couple of dollars. And I usually take the bus, but whenever I'm in a taxi, I will often have a discussion with the taxi driver about things like climate change, about social change. So it's like, or with other people, around racism or all these issues, or if things come up where I think there's injustice, I'll always say something. So there's ways that you can do things that are smaller that also have an impact.
It's almost like simply raising the question or raising a conversation is a way of furthering the conversation and making change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And,
Love that.
I'm not, I know some coaches don't want to say anything on social media, but I just tend to share a lot of stuff, which, about different issues. And if people don't want to be my client because it's too much for them, well, that's okay.
I'm with
So
you got to be yourself. You can't censor that part of you if you want to be a coach. I believe, and so you're going to
exactly,
attract the right people that way anyway.
exactly. And, people don't, I coach lots of people who have different points of view, but
Naturally.
I feel like if I'm on social media, I'm going to express who I am and what my point of view is. But just very finally around that is I think when I was younger, I was very, convinced of the truth, that I knew the truth, and that, and I think as I grow older, I do see that it's very, very important to listen to other people, listen to other points of view, and see what the kernel of truth in them, as opposed to always what's wrong. And it really concerns me today is just the level of venom on both sides, on many sides,
Yeah.
around a whole number of issues. And I don't think that helps.
I share your concern, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe I don't have all the answers. Weirdly enough, maybe it is a beneficial thing to just listen and not try to have all the answers. And so I like that sentiment, and I think we'll leave it on that positive note. And I'm going to say thanks so much, Katie, for having this conversation with me, and I really always appreciate our discussions. Any final thoughts, and where can people find you online? Is it katiecurtin.com?
Yeah. First, yeah, thank you so much, Michael, too. This was very, very enjoyable. And I always love our chats and, and conversations. And yeah, people can find me at www.katiecurtin.com.
Great.
And
Okay.
yeah,
Well, thanks so much, and we'll talk soon. It's always a pleasure.
exactly. Bye bye then.
Bye bye, Katie. Thanks.